On the 23rd of August 1994, Bill Drummond and Jimmy Corti, also known as the K Foundation, also known as the Justified Ancients of Mumu, or more popularly known as the KLF, drove to the island of Jura, off the coast of Scotland, and burnt £1 million in cash. To this day, they cannot explain why they did this. Seeking answers, they went to visit the writer and practicing wizard, Alan Moore. They asked him the same questions he'd recently asked himself. Where does someone get their ideas from? Now, to Moore, and any self-respecting artist, Moore believed that the answer to this question was of vital importance, because it was ultimately the source of his income. If he didn't have any new ideas, he wouldn't be able to write anything new, he wouldn't be able to publish anything new, he wouldn't be able to sell anything new. Now, what Alan Moore came to realise is that the world we live in, despite all appearances, is not a physical one. To make sense of the physical space we find ourselves in, we create ideas and concepts in our mind, and that is how we mediate our lives. Now, he called this conceptual world idea space. The job of an artist, therefore, was to wander idea space and bring back what they found into the physical world. Moore defined this act of transforming something from being just an idea into something real, something that could be seen, touched, manipulated, magic. Now, the BBC Programmes platform is an excellent example of a lot of the stuff James was just talking about. There is one page for every single programme the BBC has ever published or broadcast. But the World Wide Web was not founded to share documents, but to identify, share and connect ideas. It isn't the documents that people are interested in most of the time, it's the things they're about. For instance, you can find all of the episodes of Doctor Who from the latest Christmas special, all the way back to the beginning in 1963. It gives you all the production data, so where you might be able to see it next, who was in it, how long it is, the genre, that kind of thing, where you might be able to buy it. But a single episode of a TV show is only the beginning. Once you start watching or listening to a programme, you don't care about the broadcast information. You don't really care what channel it's on, what date or time it is. No, what you care about is the characters and the things that happen to those characters. So, being a Doctor Who fan since 1991, I put two and two together and started mapping out the content model within episodes of Doctor Who. And this is what I came up with. So, that screen keeps going. Like /programmes, I started with the episodes at the top. So then I took a bunch of episodes into what we call the series, and then inside an episode, I took the main plot events and mapped out the characters. And what could you do with this information? So the first thing that occurred to me was to trace the movement of characters in and out of the action, and that's what you see at the bottom there. This episode being particularly noticeable for the lack of the main characters, mainly because they wanted to give David Tennant a holiday. But also, you could play around with time. Now, obviously, this is a show all about time travel, so the events as we watch the episode are from Sally Sparrow's point of view at the top there. But if you took the same events from the Doctor's point of view, right at the bottom, the last thing that happens to Sally is the first thing that happens to him. Now, obviously, this is a time travel show, so that is very, very common. But this isn't just restricted to that. If you think of most detective shows, Columbo, you see things in order. You see the murder happen. First you see the murderer kind of falling out with the victim. Then you see the murder. Then you see the whole investigation. And then finally Columbo works out who done it. Midsummer Murders is slightly different. You don't see who did it, or exactly why and how they did it. You just see the murder itself, and it's only right at the end you get a flashback and you see the whole truth. So it's not just time travel shows which can play around with time. But as you can see, stories, even linear narratives, quickly become not just straight lines, but webs. Now Now, unsurprisingly, it turns out we're not the first to discover this, not by a long shot. He was referenced earlier this morning, but this is Aristotle, who basically wrote a book on drama, particularly tragedies, but it's a book which has pretty much informed our approach to narrative in the modern era. And what Aristotle said is, plot is a web of events that make each other likely or necessary. Much of reading a work of fiction is working out that web, trying to figure out what the future implications of something are, or trying to work out why something happened based on what's happened previously. So from the beginnings of narrative, we've always acknowledged that stories are webs. Indeed, the academic Jason Mittel describes stories as systems of information management, likening the viewing experience to that of a cognitive workout, where viewers actively construct story worlds in their minds as they watch. We all think of TV being a very passive medium, but I would argue that if you're engaged in the story you're watching, it's anything but passive. When I did this for an American audience, they didn't know who Malcolm Tucker was, so good. At the BBC's Birmingham offices, there is an entire cabinet filled with index cards, with acres of information about characters and events from the popular, long-running agricultural soap The Archers. We're in the process of digitising these records, with the hope that one day, hopefully, we can release it as something for audiences to explore, even possibly as an open data set, maybe. But these cards reminded me of something else I'd seen recently. At a country house in Caversham, near Reading, BBC Monitoring keeps an eye on the rest of the world's media, and they keep an especially close eye on those in power, which gives us this. This is one card amongst many in the biography of Nelson Mandela. Every significant event in his life, every time he was covered in any media across the world, is recorded in this system. So you go from this to this, the moment he was set free. Carefully typed, ongoing histories of significant people, narratives both fictional and factual with almost exactly the same data structure. Because, for instance, that's what news is made up of. Events, people's lives, and the way in which they're interpreted, strung together into narratives which help us understand the world around us. Now, this same approach works for pretty much any narrative we could throw at it. Even works for Shakespeare. But this happens in our day-to-day consumptions of stories too. Who here listens to Serial, the podcast? Quite a few of you. Well, you're not alone, as you're probably aware. The folks at Vox Media did the same. And although they loved it, they began to lose track of what was going on. This is a screenshot from one of their Slack channels. They have no idea what's going on, but the other thing I like is that once they realise this, put it on the site straight away. So with only the traditional audio linear-based narrative, they were starting to lose track of what was going on. So they made this. So for each episode, you could quickly see biographies of all the major characters and who was involved in which points in each episode. Again, this is starting to look at the narrative not just as a linear thing, but as an object on and of the web. Now, a little bit of a pause here. What I'm talking about here isn't necessarily branching narratives, choose your own adventure, that kind of thing. I'm not asking people to force themselves into writing those branching narratives. The combinatorial explosion inherent in doing so makes it very, very tricky to come up with a satisfying and coherent story. The strength of the hyperlink isn't just about navigation, it's about a meaningful connection. In which case I'll make a bold claim. Every creative work we've ever produced is already a web. It's already a network. We've just never had the medium to be able to express and explore this. We've just become so used to the idea of it being linear because we've confused the experience of storytelling with the content itself. Just because the process of telling or consuming a story is linear doesn't mean the narrative world below it is linear and fixed. It's a web, it's a network. It's always been like that. So just by concentrating on linear, branching user journeys and hierarchical sitemaps, we're falling into the same trap of recreating that linear experience rather than true user-centered design, recreating that world online. To reiterate, this is happening. It's not just certain people at the BBC, certain news nerds at Vox. This is happening more and more. We're going to see narrative data as important to how we consume and navigate through media. This is Amazon's X-ray feature, which started on books and is now being rolled out to TV and film. And you can see, for each scene, you can see who's in it and connect to things like that. So this, then, is the truth, revealed to us through the advent of the web, that we make sense of the world through narrative, and that those narratives themselves are in and of themselves webs. Now, a few years ago, I was asked to interview a few of my colleagues in the BBC's UX&D department and ask them what they understood by IA, what they felt about it. Now, one of them said, information architects aren't creative. They don't seem to want to imagine the future. They're too pragmatic and obsessed with the details of what's possible or not possible right now. Now, don't get me wrong. I strongly believe that functionality, simplicity and accessibility are hugely important things. Giving the user what they want, what they need, getting them to their intended content or transaction as quickly, efficiently and easy as possible is definitely still important. But yet that's surely true of any business which takes user experience seriously. And IAs is not creative? Why are designers always the ones that are regarded as special and creative in this world? I don't believe that's true. But if we are to be creative, we have to understand the medium that we're working in. So Scott McCloud, who you may recognise from this very accurate photo, wrote a book called Understanding Comics, which is regarded as many as the seminal book on why comics should be taken seriously as an art form. And he describes the creation of any work in any medium will always follow a certain path. He describes 6 steps. So number 1, the content, the idea, the purpose, the conceptual content of the work. Number 2 is the form. So the form it will take in his examples, that could be a book, that could be a chair, that could be a comic. There's the idiom, so the school of art, the genre, that kind of thing. There's the structure, so what to leave out, what to include, how to arrange and compose the work. There's the craft, the actual process of construction, problem solving, getting the job done. And finally, there's the surface, so the production values, the finishing, the immediate aesthetics. Now, in the world of UX, we talk a lot about the latter block of 3, the structure, the craft, and the surface. But I think it's the first 3 that we need to investigate a whole lot more. At the moment, you say website to someone, and that probably means a certain thing. That means the thing we've grown up with in the last 25 years, a hierarchical sitemap, desktop visual design, a contact us form. And yet, we know instinctively this is changing, that as an industry and as a medium, we're very much still in the early days. We love to point out how things are changing. More devices, more screen sizes, more inputs, and yet we don't seem to take the time to investigate the fundamental properties of this medium we call the web. If we did, I suspect we'd rethink a lot of our approaches to our work and our practice, and we'd end up in a far more creative future. This is a piece of work called Spirits Melted into Air by the designer Tom Armitage. He was commissioned by the Royal Shakespeare Company and a consultancy called Caper to explore how one might creatively visualise various Shakespearean soliloquies. Tom took video footage of the actors walking around the stage, traced their path as they performed, and printed out these paths as paper visualisations, but also as laser-cut, crafted wooden pieces. Now, when describing the element of his work and practice, Tom talks about the process of material exploration, which is a common technique for product designers and artists. He explains that invention comes from design, Until the data's been exposed to designers in a way that can explore it and manipulate it, and come to an understanding of what design is made possible by the data, there essentially is no product. To invent a product, we need to design, and to design, we need to explore the material. It's as simple as that. Now, too often, I'd argue, we get the balance the wrong way round. We start by examining existing user behaviours, coming up with journeys that recreate and slightly improve upon the old forms in a new medium. Almost like skeuomorphism, but for UX as a whole. Then we take pixels and interactions as our only material, and data and information architecture only really comes in after the real creative work is done, and is used to bring it to life. But as Tom explains, there is an equally, if not more valid, way of thinking about this. Forgive me for using the well-worn analogy of Lego, but would you really only use them to construct something to a predefined plan? No. The real pleasure of playing with Lego is in tipping the box of bricks all over the floor and making whatever you want out of them, building new, unexpected, silly things out of them. This is what we need to learn to do much, much more. If we're to treat information architecture as a creative discipline, the role of the architect isn't just to guide and build something to a predefined plan, it's to know and understand the warp and the weft of the materials to hand, as well as that vision, and to sculpt something incredible. What do I mean by that material? Well, part of that material, yes, is data. But it's different from big data. It's not about taking a mass of data and trying to tell a story around it. Stories are so much more than just the objects within them. But equally, data isn't just quantitative. I really get annoyed when people say data and they just mean numbers. Data is more than just numbers. Data can be ideas, it can be concepts, and as we've seen, stories are webs made of data. This is James Bridle. He's written a lot about coming to terms with the nature of the network and what that means for our world and our society. In his work, partly on the new aesthetic, which of course has many facets, but one of the key ones is how every web page and every essay and every line of text written or quoted therein is a link to other words, thoughts and ideas. So the hyperlink, I'd say again, isn't necessarily something new. It's revealing to us that even our most traditional forms of literature have always been hyperlinked. We've just never had the medium to make this possible. So in case I haven't made myself clear, I believe that data is the natural form for the medium we all work in, and that when we're considering a creative approach to information architecture, the screens, the journeys, the personas, they're not the point. Designing and sculpting the data into the right, useful, and or delightful shapes, that is the key. What I mean by acknowledging the network is that we should consider everything we create, every service, every product, every cultural artifact, to be a network in and of itself. Not only is it connected to others, but the work within itself is its own micro-network of ideas and concepts. Every creative work we design, we should think of as a web, and we should allow it to be experienced as one. I am a web designer. I design webs. So, we have a medium, URIs and hyperlinks, and the data that is held on them. And we have a form, the network, an actual web, not just the internet as a distribution medium. But what can we do with this? How can we be creative? Well, we heard previously about the Internet of Things. Physical objects that have a connection to the network and therefore can use the capability of the network to augment their functionality. Arduinos, that kind of thing. Probably not the sort of thing that IAs and even any kind of UX folk traditionally get involved in. But without those IAs and designers, we get something like this. The annoying talkie toaster from Red Dwarf, whose only mission is to toast and will insist on you having toast for every single meal. Michael, who's in the audience, recently summed this up in a great way. I say recently, it was a few years ago now. Information architect for things without screens, that would be a good job. Which is exactly the point. As the number of devices and inputs and possible ways of outputting information increase beyond, frankly, our ability to keep up with it, we have two choices. Either pick a few of the varieties, design just for them, and have a limited impact and a nagging sense of dissatisfaction, or concentrate first on designing the thing that you know won't change, regardless of all the above, the raw information. Then, even if you choose a few devices and inputs, you have the freedom to easily change your mind. You can react to the future without having to completely start again. That data, that information, design that first, and then you can build whatever you want on top. What the information of things gives, the information Internet of Things gives us is something entirely new. Russell T. Davies, the writer, technologist, describes it as something where what's happening now is that the web of data wants to escape the screen. It wants to materialize in the real world. It wants to get physical, become objects. Does this sound familiar? Magic is the process by which ideas leave idea space and manifest themselves in the real world. The web, that is idea space. And the Internet of Things, that is, according to Alan Moore's definition, magic. So the Internet of Things isn't just about internet fridges, it's about magic. But why should we limit ourselves to putting stuff on the web which is mundane and physical? Now, obviously, government data is very important and needs to be out there, but if we just have government data in our idea space, then we have no space to play. If we're to truly engage with the consequences of a networked world, we need spaces to play and to make mistakes. If the only open data out there is administrative and scientific, that limits us as a society overall. It limits the boundaries of idea space. So I don't just want the Internet of Things, I want the Internet of fictional things. But it's not just magic, it's something even more powerful. Now, I'm assuming like most people, when you hear the word alchemy, you probably think of this. This is Lord Edmund Blackadder trying to churn green, or discovering green, which he thought would be gold. So my understanding of alchemy, until fairly recently, was that it was about turning base metal into gold. But let's take a look at some of the laws of alchemy, which you may have noticed sprinkled throughout this talk. An alchemist must have a medium for any form of alchemy to succeed. Well, we have a medium. We have the web, we have the URIs, and we have the hyperlinks. Next, in order for true alchemy to operate, an alchemist must fully understand the structure of matter. He or she must possess the sight, which is the ability not to see an object as a whole, but as a structure constructed of trillions upon trillions of atoms. Well, I've shown you how this is true. Every story is a web. Every program is a web. Every cultural artifact. But there's one more law of alchemy, and it's probably the most important law of all. As above, so below. Or rather, the symbol of an object is equivalent to the object itself. That's the basic alchemic principle, that a physical object can be manipulated by a symbol of that object. Now, does this sound familiar? A URI is a symbol of an object. When we put an API on top of that, we can manipulate that object. So just as the image of an angel is an angel itself, this is what we have URIs for. This is the Internet of Things. This is APIs. The angels arose because they were thought of. They stepped out of our dreams and into the world. They are not science, but magic through and through. They are symbols with power. URIs are symbols with power. What if our thoughts could think for ourselves? What if our dreams no longer needed us? When these things occur and are held to be true, the time will be upon us, the time of angels. We are in this world now. The web is the medium by which we can bring ideas, any ideas, into the world. We, as information architects, can not only be creative, we can be magicians. We are the alchemists. So, you need to be thinking of webs, not just websites. The World Wide Web is a medium which is excellently suited to expressing creativity. You should engage with network culture, don't just put it to the side. It's something that you need to create culture, both high and low culture as well. And APIs and the Internet of Things show that magic and alchemy are possible, which means that these men, Sir Tim Berners-Lee and Ted Nelson, the person who coined the term hypertext, these men weren't just geniuses. The Internet isn't just a platform for existing media. It's a medium in and of itself, and we need to start making creative works attuned to that medium. But not just that. These men are secret alchemists, and magic is possible. Thank you very much.